Hello and welcome to the latest episode of the Good Dram Show with me, Chris Goodrum. Right, okay, so the theme for this afternoon's little tasting is, there is no theme for this afternoon's tasting. It's kind of a little bit of a sort of a general roundup of a few things that I tasted tail end of last year, and I tend to get sort of lots of little bits and pieces samples wise, kind of like sort of building up, and I don't always have enough to do a specific episode of the show on whatever that particular distillery is or theme or what have you, and really good, and I just really wanted to share them with you, so I thought, well, let's just do a random episode of the show. I mean, I'm often doing kind of random tastings and what have you, and so let's do a random episode of the show, and I think this is hopefully going to be really interesting. So also it means I haven't got to do any research as well about whatever and waffle on a bit, so more time for tasting. So let's introduce this afternoon's little lineup then. Right, okay, so first off we're going to kick off with the Glendronach 12-year-old Sauternes Finish, which I believe was released at tail end of last year. Don't know how long it's been finished in the ex-Sauternes casks. I did have a look for some information. Probably didn't look hard enough, but never mind. It's bottled at 46% now. I'll get onto the waffle when I actually start to taste it. Let's just carry on with the lineup. So this is quite an eclectic little bunch, it has to be said. There's some real interesting stuff here, and no more interesting than the latest release in the Midleton Very Rare series, bottled at 40%. Now, as you probably know, the long-time master distiller at Midleton, Barry Crockett, is now retired, and his trusty number 2, a chap called Brian Nation, has taken over the blending duties for the Midleton Very Rare. So interesting to see if he's made any changes to that little recipe. Now this is big thank you to Inverhouse Distillers and obviously Old Pulteney for this sample. This is a sample of the 35-year-old that was released again tail end of last year, sort of October, November kind of time, and the rep told me that they only had a handful, and I mean literally a handful of 5cl samples of this, and kindly gave me one, and that is just just awesomely nice. So yeah, looking forward to tasting that, and as you can see, not a lot left in the glass, and I thought, well, better get round to sort of like sharing this with you guys before I drink it all. While we're talking about Inverhouse Distillers, of course, one of their other very popular distilleries is the Knock distillery, or otherwise known as AnCnoc, as it's bottled as, and this is the latest in their peated range. As you know, they released Rutter and Flauter back in various times last year, and this is the latest release called the Cutter, which is I think it's the heaviest one peated bottling they've done so far in that range, at 20.5 parts per million, which is quite an awful lot, really. I mean, you talk about sort of relatively high peating levels, and of course, as we know, Octomore has skewed that, but still 50 parts per million is generally accepted to be fairly high. So this is quite high for a whiskey that's generally not peated, and it'll be interesting to see how the heavier peating has it compromised the spirit. I mean, the last two bottlings I think were something like about 12 I think, and 17 or something like that, and worked really well. So it'll be interesting to see if the heavier peating has kind of become more focal than the actual the fruitiness of the spirit. So anyway, we'll obviously get onto that in due course. And finally, we'll be looking at yet another £100 odd bottle of whiskey. This time we're looking at the latest release of the Ardbeg Kidalton, bottled at 46%, no age statement. I believe the name Kidalton had been used in previous bottlings. Certainly I think there have been two. The last one that I tasted was a back in, check my notes, 2006. Was a 14-year-old that was distilled in 1981. This one, like I said, has no age statement, is bottled at 46% and is made from Ardbeg that's been aged in both American oak and sherry. So I remember the last Ardbeg Kidalton that I tasted was exceptionally good, so that's got quite an awful lot to live up to. So there you have it. That's this afternoon's little lineup. I think it's going to be really, really interesting. It's probably going to take some time to get through all of these. So make yourself comfy, and let's make a start with the first one then, shall we? Right. Okay. So Glendronach, and now to me, Glendronach is one of those distilleries that I'm not a big fan of their American oak aged spirit. It's one of those distilleries that I think just seems to work better when they use some sherry cask, and there's others like Glengoyne as well. I just don't get on with the American oak aged spirit. It just has too much of a hardness to it, and a lack of sweetness and juiciness. But stick it in some sherry butts, and it's pretty impressive stuff. And as you know, I've done a tasting on Glendronach. I like Glendronach. I'm not the world's biggest sherry cask whiskey lover, as you well know, and so it's always disappointing when I taste a bottling that's been aged in American oak and it just doesn't do it for me. So anyway, what I'm basically trying to say is this has got a lot to live up to. So let's see what the nose gives us then, shall we? Now that is a lovely nose. It's got that sort of hard, granity Highland character, a little bit austere, which I often find with, like I said, American oak aged Glendronach. It's not fainty, sometimes can be, and the Sauternes is kind of sitting in the background. It's adding a little bit of sweetness, a little bit of kind of grapey juice, honey, bit of spice. That is lovely, and I think that's the issue I have with things like Glengoyne and Glendronach in American oak, is that there's just not enough sweetness there, and I don't like sweetness per se, but sometimes when you have a slightly more austere, hard spirit, then obviously you need something to balance it up. It's the same with things like Deanston and Dufftown to a certain extent. Yeah, they have more of an industrial character, which does need some sweetness, and if it hasn't got it, you're just going, God, that's hard work. But no, this is absolutely, and I don't think, and certainly before you all write in and say, but Glendronach isn't an industrial spirit. No, it's not an industrial. I'm not saying. I'm just basically trying to sort of make a point. A little bit of coffee now, sort of slightly coffeed spices, slightly gritty. That is lovely. That is superb. And incidentally, I tasted this for, what was it, which number whiskey magazine? 124, I think it was, edition 124. And I gave it a really high score. I think I gave it sort of 9 point something odd, because I was really, really impressed with it. And this is absolutely lovely. Still got a little bit of gristiness on the barley, but it's just got a lovely fullness, honeyed character. I must admit, when I tasted it blind, I didn't peg it for a Sauternes finish, and I think that shows you how well integrated the finishing cask is, that it is really not that obvious. Palate. Oh, that's a gorgeous finish. It's again, the palate is like the nose. It's a lovely combination of the sort of hard, granity Highland malt and the sort of biscuity, honeyed, sweet character. and it all kind of like just fits in really, really nicely. It dovetails, and it kind of has a little bit of sultanery dried fruit, dried grape, a little bit of spice. Very, very long. Lovely bit of little bit of cocoa on the finish, little bit of spice. All round, I think that is very, very good. And I thought it was that good. I bought some of it for the shop, and it's not particularly expensive as well. And I thought, yeah, wow, that's just really very, very good value for money as well. So, yeah, really good start, I think. Right, okay, on to the Midleton Very Rare. As you know, it doesn't have an age statement. It's a vatting of various aged spirit from the Midleton distillery. So let's see what the nose gives us. Where's the pot still character? Where's the spiciness? Where's that grippy graininess? Think it's all buried underneath that toffee. Now it's interesting that a certain Mr. Murray seemed to imply, well, he did more than imply, he bloody well stated that he thought the caramel had been added in the bottling hall, because he has a tendency, well, I don't know whether he tasted this particular vatting in the lab, but he often has a tendency to be given access to those kind of things, and seemed to think that it was completely different. Now, he may well be right. We had this conversation about caramel, I believe, or I certainly wrote an article about it, and it's often difficult to tell unless it's really, really overt, although there is a lot of toffee caramel character to this, but to me it feels natural, like there's just a lot of oak, and it's big and it's chunky, and it's almost got fat bourbon corn kind of character. And tasted blind, I wouldn't have picked this for a pot still whiskey. It has absolutely zero pot still character as far as I'm concerned. Yeah, there's a little bit of spiciness kind of like somewhere in the background, but it's just toffee and caramel, and you know, for something that's been relatively consistent, this is I wouldn't stock this. I mean, this is easily 3 figures, and the quality just isn't good enough for me. It's not, you know, if somebody wanted to spend 140, 150 pounds, I would not go for this. I'd go for other things well before this, and that's how I kind of rate, you know, expensive whiskey. I rate all whiskies, but certainly expensive whiskies. It's basically a case of, would I spend the money on it? And if the answer is no, then it doesn't go on the shelf. Simple as that, really. A little bit of smoke coming through now, but God, there's no escaping that caramel, it has to be said. Palate. Well, that's flat as a pancake. Really, really overdone with the caramel. Bitter, got a real bitterness on the aftertaste, which I suppose, in hindsight and thinking about it, does kind of seem to imply added caramel. Soft. I don't get any pot still spices again. I get a little bit of cocoa, a little bit of mocha, but overall I'm just getting that bitter sensation on the finish. It's not impressive at all, it has to be said, and if this has been carameled post distillation, and well, the colour is a bit darkish, then you really shouldn't be doing this. You should stop that, because, you know, you've ruined a bloody good whiskey, you know, and it's just ridiculous. You know, everybody knows that Midleton is a batch bottling. It varies from year to year. We know that. We know the colour is going to be slightly different. You don't have to treat us like complete bloody idiots, you know. Brian, if this has been tampered with and you're not the suspect, you haven't poured the caramel into it, kick some butt and tell your distillery not to bloody muck about with bloody good whiskey. It's not necessary. It is not required. It has killed your whiskey, and let's say it's not doing an awful lot for your reputation now, is it, mate? Right. Okay. So that's right. I'll get off my soapbox now, and I'll probably get a horrible email or telephone call, I imagine, from somebody from the distillery, sort of giving me a load of grief. But you know, well, you know, at the end of the day, if you're going to put a product out, like I said, everybody, you know, all reps, you know, if you're going to put a product out there, you've got to expect that you may well get some unfavourable reviews for it, you know. And I think my criticism is constructive. I don't think it's kind of like, oh, well, that's just a load of crap. So there you have it. But you know, people don't like criticism, people don't like bad reviews, and people often get angry. But I've got broad shoulders, it's happened before, it's not going to kill me. So anyway, time to move on, I think. And what a whiskey to move on to. Whoa. Old Pulteney 35-year-old. I believe aged in a combination of ex-American oak and ex-sherry cask, as seems to be their want, shall we say. So let's give the nose a whirl then, shall we? Oh no, that is lovely. Absolutely buckets of dusty American oak, a little bit of soft sherry spice. Balance is absolutely stunning, and I must admit, I mean, Pulteney seems to be one of those distilleries, like Tomatin to a certain extent, that seems to just be able to use a sherry cask in such a way that they augment rather than sort of like completely obliterate any distillery character. A little bit of dried fruit, a little bit of coastal notes, some apricots and honey. Oh, but it's just that oak, that mature oak that is just, oh, absolutely wonderfully aromatic. Dusty, mature, a little bit of tropical fruit creeping in, a little bit of banana, melon. Oh, that is deep. I mean, this is not cheap. I mean, I forget what the price tag is. I think it's, oh, is it close to 350 quid, something like that? But good God, this is good. And I mean, after tasting the Midleton Rare, I mean, this just pounds it. You know, this is just, quality is just sort of like way up there. You know. Palate. Oh, that is good. Oh, it's just so complex. And you got the mature oak, you got the honey, you've got a little bit of maritime character, a little bit of spicy dried fruits from the sherry, some apricot, a little bit of toffee, a little bit of walnut, date. It's big, it's mouth-filling, it's got a lovely salty aftertaste. It sort of cleans and freshens everything up. Oh, that is just sort of big, juicy, and really impressive, it has to be said. And alright, so you don't get a huge amount of progression. It's not one of those kind of malts. It kind of almost delivers everything in kind of one go, and you're sort of like tasting it and you go, oh my God, that's just, I'm just being bombarded here with flavours. And it's just really impressive. And yeah, that is definitely worth the price tag, it has to be said. That is just absolutely stunning. Right, okay, and so let's move on to the first of our two peated malts, the AnCnoc Cutter, bottled at 46? Yeah, 46%. So let's give the nose a go and see what happens. a lot of peat, sweet peat, slightly heathery peat, little bit phenolic, but mainly sort of carbohydratey peat, sort of dense but sweet. But the spirit underneath is very big, it's very juicy. Now, it's not, I mean, if you were sort of like to say, sum up AnCnoc, generally speaking, you know, big juicy fruit is not the words that you would spring to mind. I mean, you know, it is more, to me it's the classical Highland malt. It's crisp, it's granity, it's got some honey, but it's got that sort of, you know, granity austerity, which to me, certainly on a 12-year-old, is its kind of hallmark. It is not about big fruit, but this has got a lot of big fruit, it has to be said. And it really stands up to the peat. I mean, it's kind of like really robust. And as you know, if you start mucking about with peat, the tendency is that the peat can be the kind of focal point. It tends to be what you kind of zoom in on, because it is such a obvious kind of character. But, and you know, unless you've got something else there, whether it's some oaks and fruit, what have you, it can seem relatively one-dimensional. But this is absolutely stunning. I mean, it's really, really good. Thankfully, the bottling run was a little bit bigger than the bottling run of the previous two peated editions, so there was a little bit more of it to go around, and it is still available. And again, not particularly expensive. Oh, but it's just so good. It's deep, and it's got this, like I said, it's got this lovely sweet peat, but it's got some real fruit beneath it, some apricot, pineapple, fleshy yellow fruit, little bit of granitiness. I mean, it doesn't carry an age statement, but it's quite difficult to sort of pin down an age, because it's just so big and fruity. It's relatively young, but I suppose at the end of the day it doesn't really matter how old it is, it's how good it is. And my God, this is good. Really, very, very impressive. A little bit of cocoa coming in now, a little bit of coffee, but it's really fresh. It's got almost a kind of salty character, but it's that the Highland minerality that's kind of like finally coming out. You know, sort of like the fruit has finally let go of that minerality, and it's almost salty in character. That's that fresh and that crisp now. Palate. Kind of opens up with not quite so sweet peat. It's more earthy, a little bit more dusty, and then you get a bit of toffee, a bit of oak, a bit of fruit, a bit of fleshy fruit that we found on the nose, and then peat comes back again and it sweetens on the finish, and you get the minerality coming through, which gives it sort of a real sort of dryness, but not an overt dryness, not a sort of an austere dryness, because that big juicy fruit is still lingering and still filling the mouth with a sort of wonderful, slightly citric, apricot-y, barleyed, honeyed. That is absolutely fantastic. That's really, really nice. I mean, that is classic how to use peat but not to overwhelm the spirit, and they've really chosen some excellent casks, and that sort of balance I would have thought would have been easier to get if you used a vatting. You know, if you vatted in some non-peated malt or non-peated whiskey with peated whiskey, rather than sort of like, you know, just going for the whole shebang, so to speak. And so yeah, very, very good, really impressive. Like that. That's good. Right, and finally, let's take a look at the Ardbeg Kidalton. Now, I believe, well, any time the distillery releases a bottling, it disappears within a number of days. So I think it was certainly 3 figures when it was released, and the price of Ardbeg seems to have gone through the bloody roof, it has to be said. I mean, what was the last bottling of Supernova? I mean, that was ridiculously priced. I mean, I bought the one they released prior to that, and, you know, I forget how much that was now, but I remember looking at the price of the last Supernova and thinking, no, you know what, I'm not going to spend that much money on a bottle of whiskey without ever having tasted it, which will just go into the collection anyway, you know. And you know, so anyway, let's see what the Kidalton does on the nose. Classic Ardbeg nose. It has that slight woody peatiness, that intense dusty violets, plenty of American oak character with just a little bit of spicy sherry cask. It's classic. That is just, it's just Ardbeg, you know. That is lovely, lovely fruit and peat and cask. Great combination, it has to be said. Really, very, very enjoyable. Quite coastal. Well, no, not quite coastal. Sort of moderately coastal. Getting a lot more sort of coffee and mocha and peat. Dry, dusty, slightly fishy peat. Classic Ardbeg. Yeah, really, very, very good. So, palate. It's a little bit unfocused, if I'm being honest. There's not a great deal of complexity. I'm getting a lot of dusty, sooty peat, and that's it. It's a bit flat. It's a bit, there's no vibrancy. There's no intensity. There's no. It's kind of flat. I mean, I don't think it's caramel flattened. It's possibly that it's the oak that is deadening any sort of intense saltiness, but I'm getting a little bit of sort of sweet peat on the finish, a little bit of violets, but I'm not really getting any fruit. I'm not getting any burnt wood. I'm not getting any salt. It's a bit, and you know, disappointing, I think is the word. The finish is really nice. The finish is pleasantly peated. It's got a good length. It's the bit in the middle that really is pretty disappointing, it has to be said, and that's a big shame. I mean, I love Ardbeg, you know, and yeah, okay, sometimes the overt marketing can be a little bit much. It's, you know, they are a bit like Bruichladdich, when Bruichladdich were sort of like in their marketing pomp, shall we say. They're very, very good at what they do. They have a lot of followers. They know that whatever they release, whether it's good, bad or indifferent, is going to sell. Does that mean that the distillery has become slightly complacent? Well, it's possible. I mean, I suppose, you know, if you know that you know, everything you stick in a bottle is going to sell, irrespective of what critics say about it, you know, they might say it's the greatest thing since sliced bread. They might say it's bloody awful, you know. Doesn't matter, because people are going to buy it because it's Ardbeg, because it's gonna. I don't know what it is about Ardbeg, and there are, shall we say, people that are kind of absolutely obsessed. I mean, you know that it's going to make money in the long run, generally speaking, if you're adding it to your collection. And there are some people that just will drink nothing other than Ardbeg. You know, I mean, for the life of me, I have no idea why. I mean, life is far, far too short for drinking the same whiskey over and over again. So really, that is the question. Has Ardbeg become complacent? Has it sort of taken its eye off the ball and said, it's not perfect, but yeah, we'll stick it in a bottle, people will pay money for it? Am I becoming a little bit cynical? I think the whisky industry seems to kind of gloss over the cynicism, shall we say, and there is an element of basically things that shall not be spoken about, and the use of caramel, the sulphur sherry butts, the blatant disregard for the travel retail market, and its use as a dumping ground for pretty poor whisky is well known to a lot of people. A lot of people in the industry, a lot of critics, a lot of journalists. People know that these things go on and these things happen, but the whisky industry as a whole will not talk about it. It doesn't want to talk about it. It wants to perpetuate the myth that everything is wonderful, that they do nothing wrong, and it's a complete and utter lie. The whisky industry is an industry like any other. There are dodgy practices, there are things that go on that you really don't want to know about. There are, you know, things are discussed in meetings and what have you. It is not a nice little cottage industry. This is a multi-billion pound industry that has its rogue practices, and I'm not saying that every distillery does them, but you know, let's put it this way. A lot of stuff is done that nobody knows about really at the end of the day, but you can guess because you have a product in front of you at the end of the day and you taste it and you think, what is going on here, you know, and you start to put two and two together and you question things, and I'm kind of summing up without summing up, so let's sum this up properly. Cue the music. Right, okay, so I was onto a bit of a soapbox, and this is kind of a bugbear of mine, as you probably well know, that sometimes the whisky industry kind of takes the consumers for complete and utter bloody mugs. You know, and that is true. You know, they will sometimes release any old god-awful crap, and you'll buy it. Now, I'm not saying for a minute that the Ardbeg is god-awful crap. It's just, by Ardbeg's high standards, really, really disappointing. Anyway, shut up about the Ardbeg. This is not about the Ardbeg. This is, let's talk about the rest of the whiskies that we've reviewed. So, let's start with the Sauternes Finish Glendronach, which seems to have been an age ago since I actually tasted that. Bloody good whisky, let's say that. And probably more praise heaped upon it because there's no sherry in sight in that baby, and it is a lovely whisky. And as I said, I'm not, you know, the world's biggest fan of unsherried Glendronach, so absolutely stunning stuff. Really, really like that. Midleton Very Rare. Well, I think I said plenty about that, and I'm probably going to get some hate mail from the Ardbeg lovers, as I'm going to get hate mail from the Midleton distillery. So I'm probably sort of going to get lots of hate mail. But like I said, that is not your greatest bottling of Midleton Very Rare, and let's hope that the 2015 bottling is considerably better, should we say. Let's talk about the Old Pulteney 35. I mean, oh, just beautiful, beautiful whiskey. I haven't tasted, well, I probably have tasted the odd not so great bottling of Pulteney. Road to the Pole, for example. I mean, that really wasn't very, very good at all. But their older age statement stuff, the 40, I mean, the 40 is just still one of those whiskies that I will, you know, forever remember. It's stunning, absolutely stunning. And the 35-year-old, although it doesn't get close, it's not that far away in actual fact from the 40-year-old. And it's a lot cheaper than the 40-year-old, and it's very, very good, and I really was impressed with that. AnCnoc, as you know, I am a big fan of AnCnoc. Personally, I prefer the younger age statements. I love the freshness of the 12-year-old, the crispness. I find some of the older expressions where the wood starts to come in and kind of takes the edge off the freshness, although very, very good, like the 16-year-old and the 22. I just, yeah, it's like Balblair. I just love the younger age statement. Just love that sort of crisp freshness. But coming back to the Cutter, I mean, again, a really fantastic whiskey. Great use of peat, plenty of character, plenty of body, plenty of fruit. Really, really well balanced. And finally the Ardbeg. Well, I think I said enough about the Ardbeg, so we probably shouldn't say anything more because I'm probably just offending people. But hell, you know, it happens. Anyway, so that's that's this little random episode of the show put to bed. I hope you've enjoyed it. If you have comments on about anything I've said about this whiskey, feel free to, you know, make comments in the box underneath the video on YouTube. Send me an email or what have you. You know, at the end of the day, I kind of stand by my comments, and I think you know, if you agree with them, great. If you don't, you don't. You know, yeah, life's too short, as they say, for all that kind of stuff. So anyway, all that's left to say is I hope you enjoyed this episode of the show. Good Dram, and good afternoon.